Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Center for Rural Affairs Town Hall, helping families find success and stability. The center has been working since 1973 to support rural communities, rural economies, and rural families. And as a part of that effort, we work to ensure that rural folks have reliable access to essential goods and services. In some rural areas, it can be more difficult to access healthcare. It can be harder to find good-paying jobs, or more difficult to get a hold of fresh, healthy food. The center takes a well-rounded approach in working to aid in the economic success of these communities and to provide access to good quality of life. That comes in the form of small business lending and support, working to support farm and community life, and also supporting policy that supports the well-being of rural people and rural communities. Right now, before the legislature is a bill that could help to do just that. LB 108 is a bill to solve the cliff effect problem in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. And that cliff effect is something that causes some people to lose their benefits before they make enough money to replace those benefits. Later on in this discussion, we'll hear more about what that cliff effect term means, and why we need to fix it, and how LB 108 does that. First, before we do that, I'm just going to give a bit of an overview of some statistics and facts about food insecurity in rural parts of the state. In Nebraska, food insecurity is higher than the national average at about 12.3% versus 11.1%. And that rate is even higher for rural counties. The highest rates of food insecurity are in some of the rural counties like Thurston, Sheridan, and Hooker at 18.9, 15.2, 17.4% respectively. And since the pandemic started, most of our rural legislative districts have seen significant increases in food insecurity too, from anywhere to 140 to 150% more than what food insecurity was prior to the pandemic. And child food insecurity is particularly high in these places, and in some rural counties reaching as high as into the 30% range. We also know that a significant portion of the food insecure population in rural counties fall into this cliff effect income gap. In many counties, those folks account for 1 in 5 of the cases of food insecurity, folks who fall into this cliff effect gap. Today, we are fortunate enough to have with us the sponsor of LB 108, which would address this gap, Senator John McCollister. Senator McCollister is a second-term senator for District 20 in the Omaha area, and prior to the legislature, he served as the director of the Platt Institute for Economic Research. We're also pleased to have with us Amanda Sindelar, who's the Economic Development Director for Atkinson, Nebraska, a city of over 1,200 people, and just around that number in Holt County. And Amanda has some personal experience with this program, as well as some relevant expertise in the area of rural economic development here in our state. So each of our 2 speakers will take around 10 minutes to introduce themselves and share their perspectives on the challenges mentioned above, on food insecurity, improving the SNAP program, and this bill. After these initial remarks, we'll turn to a Q&A, so please be thinking about questions you might have. If you're on Facebook, enter them into the Facebook comment section. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can enter them into the chat. And then we'll have a discussion and try to address each of those questions. So with that, we will start with Senator McCollister. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Nathan. I see I've got some friends on the call. Am I muted? No? Are we good? At any rate, good to see my friend Janet Palmtag, John Hanson, and of course, Mark Welch. When I was on the Revenue Committee, I saw a lot of Mark in that committee. Yes, I introduced LB 108. It's a bill related to food stamps or SNAP benefits. It's in a long line of bills that have been proposed before the legislature since about 2011. Tanya Cook introduced a bill, and since that time, there have been about 5 bills introduced to help expand the gross income levels for SNAP benefits, and I'll explain exactly how that works. The current effort would raise those gross limits up to 185% of the federal poverty rate. That's a big boost. The current rate's 130%, and we'll illustrate what the effect would be on a family of 4 as we get into the talk a little bit. And obviously, SNAP is for the working poor. And you gave some statistics, current statistics that even surprised me. And I would love to have those statistics so we could put those into our opening. But generally, I think around the country, pre-pandemic, there are 8, 9, perhaps 10% of folks were food insecure. And that, of course, has grown with the pandemic. No surprise, because the working poor work in service industries. What industries are those? That's the fast food industry, travel industry, retail sales, and work of that nature. And of course, those are the jobs that are 8, 10, 12, perhaps $15 an hour. But even at that rate of $15 an hour, a family can't make it. A family of 4 just can't make it at that rate. And so they are generally eligible for food stamps. You might have a person working at McDonald's making $12 an hour, but they just can't make it on $12 an hour. And so they end up, working 2 or more jobs, and they still can't get their head above water. And that's a problem. Some of the statistics that we've been able to gather, 160,000 people are receiving unemployment benefits since the start of the pandemic. And we're still down, even after some of the jobs are coming back, down 30,000 jobs, 30,000. And employment in food services and accommodations is still down 13%, or 11,000 jobs from pre-pandemic levels. Jobs within the arts, entertainment, and recreation remain down 16% since the start of the pandemic. So, we're still feeling pandemic in some of those service jobs. Well, how does this work? The gross and net income for SNAP. A family of 4, let's say, making $34,000, and this is all family members, $34,450 under current limits. Your net limit, and there's a gross limit and a net limit, is $26,208. So what that means is certain deductions you can make from your pay, from family pay, to reduce that down to your net level. What kind of deductions are we talking about? Earnings deduction, 20% of earnings, dependent care deduction for your children, child support deduction, medical expenses, excess shelter. Some of those things can reduce your gross income down to a net level. But when you raise that gross level up to 185 or 165 from 130, that enables a family to earn more without losing their SNAP benefits. So let's say we raise it up to 185% of the federal poverty rate, and you could make $48,000, bringing your net down to the 26,000. So you can deduct $22,000 off of your gross income to still arrive at that net income of 26 grand. Okay, let's say we move it to 165% of gross, the poverty rate. Well, that would put you at $43,243. So you could, deduct up to about $17,000 in those deductions that I just named. So when we raise the rate from 130 up to 165 or 185, a family can make more without losing their benefits. And that is so important. When I was growing up in the 70s, it could be that a family would have a dad, a single person earning an income, and that would cover the family's costs. Not anymore. And particularly as union jobs have gone down, manufacturing jobs have gone down, it's getting harder and harder for people that are on the lower rung of the income ladder to make ends meet. So we hope to increase this rate up to 185%. but I have an uncomfortable feeling that we may be forced, in order to get the bill passed, to bring that rate down to 165% of the federal poverty rate. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're trying to do. How am I doing on time, Nathan?
Good. Yep, you're doing good. Is there anything else you'd like to add on an introductory level about the bill, or?
Well, I think we've got either 25 or 30 people supporting the bill. And unfortunately, some of my Republican rural colleagues are the ones that are at the most trouble. And that is so ironic because, as you mentioned, Nathan, that's where we've got some of the biggest difficulty on getting people fed, is rural areas with families. So that's a problem. And I really reach out to those folks on the call to help us persuade some of those rural senators that supporting this bill is a good thing to do.
Sure, and I think we'll have some questions relevant to that later on as well. But first, I think we can go to Amanda and hear from her about her experience and her thoughts on this subject.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here today just to support the LB 108 that Senator McCollister is heading. When I was 15 years old and a sophomore in high school, I became a single mother of a very beautiful baby girl who is now 26 years old. I was fortunate to have supporting parents who assisted me through high school and college to help me raise my child. Once I was on my own after graduating college, the SNAP program was of great assistance to me to help me make sure that my daughter was always receiving nutritional food that she needed as a young child that I may not have always been able to afford. With this assistance, I also was able to afford childcare and therefore work full time. I feel that I may not have been able to obtain the higher level position I was hired for right out of college if I was not assisted by the SNAP program. I was a journalist for the last 20 years. I worked for some pretty amazing newspapers that offered employee benefits. Due to this, I was able to remove myself from all state aid programs within a few years. I do remember turning down my first raise because I would have lost my benefits. I am now the economic development director of my hometown and am able to help local residents and businesses. I truly believe if I had not been given that assistance when I needed it at that point in my life, I may not have been able to travel down the same path. I'm very thankful for the SNAP program. I believe it is important for that pathway to opportunity to be open to other members of the community too. This program helps people who are on that path towards growth and success to have the reliable access to food their family needs while working their way to self-sufficiency. That's good for families and for the community and good for economic growth.
Thanks, Amanda. I think that the point you raise is in your story is a good one too, and Senator McCollister mentioned it as well, that part of what this is about is not creating a disincentive from people from being able to make progress and move forward. And so you mentioned that you turned down a raise, that would have been a benefit for your family to have, because overall you would have faced a net loss of income and a loss of the food you're able to provide for your household. And so that's part of this as well, as I think both of you were suggesting that it's not a matter of just sort of being a free handout, but really something that's meant to help people step up that ladder to being stable and self-sufficient, and that's good for the whole economy to have people producing more and moving up in the employment ladder. We can open up to questions now. I encourage everybody who is joining the call to enter into the chat or into the comments your thoughts or concerns or questions. And Senator McCollister, I don't know if you have any response to all of that was just mentioned.
Yeah, matter of fact, Dave Welch asked a question, and I'm going to go through the example I gave of a family of four once again, and here are the numbers. The maximum, let's assume a family of four with a income of $34,450. And under the current SNAP rules, you can bring that down to a 26,208 with those deductions that I named. And that is your net. So that's a difference of what, $8,000 that you can use with those deductions. And as that gross limit goes up to either 165, up to 185, once again, we're currently at 130. And I'd say about a third of the states in the country are at about that 130 level. There's about another 30 states have increased it in some fashion, some up to 200%. So going back to that example, family of four making $34,450, you can, at current levels, at 130%, you can bring that income down to 26,000 with those deductions. If you can go up to 165% with the gross, you can have income of 43,243 and still meet that net income requirement. And if we went up to 185%, you could make as much as 48,480 and still meet that net income level of 26,000. So that gives you about $22,000 worth of deductions you could take for childcare, excess medical deductions, excess dwelling expense, things like that, that make it possible for somebody to still receive SNAP without losing SNAP benefits. Is that clear as mud? Other questions?
Yeah, I think that's helpful. So another question, I guess, to that too, is there's another part of the test for somebody's income. In addition to somebody's net or gross income, there's also an asset test or an asset cap. And some people in conversations about this bill have raised that question to me. And does it still leave people out if the asset cap remains low? Do we need to raise that? Other states have raised that cap. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Senator Tanya Cook raised it in 2011 up to $25,000. And I guess I wasn't aware that was as much of a problem as the income limits were. Yeah, we could always amend the bill if that is in fact a major problem. But I'm going to have a hard enough time getting the bill passed at 165% without changing it. That could be a bill for next year. And I'd like to hear from people, is that a major concern? Sure.
We've got a question coming in here, a couple questions coming in here into the chat, and one is from Paula Sandberg, and she's wondering about self-employed people. She says, this is what I see in my area. I'm surrounded by farmers, ranchers, and independent contractors and small business owners. If you only do taxes once a year instead of having a monthly paycheck, you are a year behind. And last year was a perfect storm for many. So how would this affect those types of folks?
Well, you're getting into the weeds on how SNAP actually works. So I'm not sure I can help with that. But maybe if we can copy the questions down and we have a chance to react, we can send the answers back through you, Nathan.
Sure.
Let me ask: our farmers and ranchers who have a great deal of land, are they food insecure like some of the occasional workers in some of the farm towns? It's my question.
Sure. Then Paula, you can feel free to answer that in the chat. She says yes is her quick answer. So I think you have a whole broad spectrum there, like in other industries, and especially with, I know Paula raises cattle, and livestock farmers have had an especially tough year with some of the bottlenecks in meat processing and all that. We also have a question from Carol Dennison about CARES Act or Recovery Act, and how that affects funding for this bill. And that, I think more broadly, that's a good question. How does this get funded? What will it cost the state? And that funding question.
Yeah, that is a good question. And SNAP benefits, the benefits themselves are fully funded by the federal government. And the state is only obligated to pick up half of the administrative expense. However, this year, with the bill just passed in the US Congress, it authorized Nebraska $3 million to absorb the extra cost to administer SNAP. So the fiscal note to the state is absolutely zero. When we first saw that fiscal note, it was in excess of $250,000. But when that bill was passed, that fiscal note went away. And so it's pretty hard to argue on the floor of the legislature that if there's no cost to the bill and the federal government pays 100% of the benefits, why not raise the allowable amount? And that's the argument we're going to make. So we've got $3 million to work with, and that carries the administrative fees through 2023.
Great. And Carol had a follow-up as well, asking if there's not an objection based on cost to the state. She wonders, what are the objections to the bill that are coming forward?
Well, the objections we're getting is, well, yeah, we may be in a pandemic now, and the federal government's paying for all the benefits, right? But after the pandemic's over and the economy goes, starts moving forward at a brisk pace, how do we get people to work if they are receiving SNAP benefits? And I don't see that being a problem, because I don't see the wages going up as fast as necessary to eliminate that issue. But they're afraid that the federal government's going to get stuck with more and more debt, and I understand that on a philosophical basis, but here we are in the middle of a pandemic, and the economy is kind of bumping along. So I think this is an expense we need to deal with. Yeah, long term, we're probably not in a sustainable situation with regard to national debt, but the same thing applies to Social Security and Medicare. So, the fact that Congress is fiscally irresponsible is something we're not going to fix today.
Fair enough. And I want to turn it to Amanda too about some of these issues about how the pandemic has affected the economies of rural parts of our state and employment, and even to talk about longer term challenges that people face in finding jobs in some of our smaller towns.
Yeah, due to the COVID restrictions, we saw many of our local Main Street businesses struggle, but thankfully we only had one business that closed its door indefinitely. I guess like many small towns, we also saw several businesses and residents struggle due to insufficient internet services. And I know it's on a different topic, but thankfully we had a company that was selected as a recipient of that remote access rural broadband grant that was administered by the Nebraska Department of Economic Development and made possible by the Federal CARES Act funding as well. So our fiber has been deployed 100% inside our city limits, and installs are currently underway. I know that next door we have a nonprofit organization that since I would say a month after the pandemic started, they have been providing a food bank every single week, as food has been coming from, I can't remember if it's through United Way or which food bank it's in Norfolk that it originates from. And we have it lined up for blocks upon blocks that people are coming to come and get those free food boxes. So I do think that it is hurting our local town of 1,200 people if you have over 12 blocks lined of vehicles waiting till those food boxes are available. I guess it reaches everywhere here. I know local farmers and ranchers that do use the SNAP program. I grew up on a farm and ranch myself, and I guess it reaches everywhere.
Well, I'll just say that we can see what a dramatic effect it could have to increase that gross income limits. And so, those people on this call really need to contact your state senator and say it's important, because just what you said, Amanda, the pantry programs have expanded to a great extent to help people during this pandemic, and they need to understand that it's a major problem, particularly in rural areas. I've been a part of a pantry program in Omaha, and we've seen a pretty dramatic increase in people using the pantry as well. And that's simply a function of the downturn in the economy, particularly in those service jobs.
Carol asks when this issue will come before the floor. I don't know if there's a good answer for that. If you have any insight there, Senator McCollister.
Well, it's my personal priority bill, and I think there's a good chance that we'll see it sometime in April, but I don't know that. And we may have a week's notice to get out to all of our supporters and contact your state senator and urge their support. So, maybe what I need to be doing is, when that time does come, Nathan, is, give you the word, and you and your organization can spread the word and hopefully garner additional support for the bill. I can't predict when it'll come. And if it gets stuck on the floor, it may be next year. I hope it's not that, because we need to get it enacted.
Yeah, and I think that's especially true when talking about not just how these statistics and numbers about the increase in food insecurity and in the whole state, including rural parts of the state this year. But as Amanda pointed out, those are real individuals in our community, not just figures and numbers who are in a special amount of need right now. So we'll be certainly paying attention and following that as things start to get scheduled, and Carol will keep you up to date on that through our lists as well, and everybody else who's subscribed. I guess I'll kind of throw at you some of the questions that you might hear from some folks in this rural constituency. Is there a concern that doing this, that raising the cap sort of just adds more folks to the public dole, and keeps folks in a position of actually not increasing their self-sufficiency or something along those lines? What would you say to somebody who had that concern?
I'd say it's not true, and I'll tell you why. 60%, perhaps 70% of the people on the SNAP program are working one or more jobs. A great many, perhaps it's 30%, are disabled in some way or elderly. So in Nebraska, we do a great job with job participation, and it's the working poor that are the real issue. I don't see any slackers, abusing the system. Fraud rates on SNAP are less than 2%. So fraud is not a problem. People not working and simply taking advantage of the system, that's not a problem either. Nebraska has got a great work ethic, and that translates into people in the lower rungs, particularly 2 or more jobs just to make ends meet. So I think that's a bogus issue.
Nathan, if this is John, maybe I could jump in a minute here. I'm going to have to leave before too long. I have a radio program I have to do here shortly. But we've been working with these issues generally, but also working with family farmers and ranchers who are in crisis since 1984. So, excuse me, in the last couple of years at the Rural Response Hotline, we've set new monthly records for the most new high stress callers to that hotline since 1984. So to give you kind of an idea, we've put together the numbers for last year. And so in terms of just kind of understanding kind of what the need is, and we have it by demographic, we have it by gender, we have it by county, and these calls come in from across the state of Nebraska. And so last year we had 1,442 new calls from new callers. We had a total of 4,573 calls. A lot of these calls were characterized as high financial stress calls. So, we help route them toward food pantries and food assistance programs, legal counseling, legal assistance, bookkeeping programs, financial assistance, and also for folks that are experiencing a lot of stress and need of mental health counseling through the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services funding. We're able to bring in $75 in our mental health vouchers, which is a unique feature of hotlines across the country. Our hotline is the longest continuously serving, so we have the most kind of baseline information on which to look. But to give you an idea, and these are folks that are independent, proud, slow to reach out for help. And so we distributed last year 3,435 mental health vouchers, 1 hour at a time. That's right at $200,000 worth of vouchers. And so the need from our perspective is clear. And maybe someone has better numbers, Senator, maybe you have a better number, but the Department of Health and Human Services historically has had a factor that they have applied to folks who apply for poverty indicator programs, food assistance, and aid-dependent children, et cetera. But there's about 3 or 4 primary poverty indicator programs. And so, especially in rural areas, they figure that for every person that comes in and asks for help, there's at least 2 people, depending on the program, back home that are qualified, but won't come in and ask. And
John, John, if you can send those statistics to me and the callers or the sponsor of the calls, we'd like to have that. And I'll put that into my introduction that when we go to the floor.
Well, thank you. And the problem that you raised earlier about the perception by a lot of rural senators is that poverty is a problem that exists in the urban communities, and yet the poverty rates are very, very comparable. Those children that qualify for food assistance at schools is virtually the same between urban and rural. And yet the folks who represent rural communities oftentimes act like poverty is not an issue in their area, which is, I think is the rate right now for lunch assistance for kids is running a little over 50%.
Wow.
It's very high.
Well, it's higher in rural areas than it is in urban areas. I know that to be true.
Yeah, and so I can try to dig those numbers out for you as well.
That'd be great, John. Thanks for being on the call.
Oh, and thank you all. And I'm sorry, but I do have an appointment here I've got to go to. Good luck.
Thanks.
Thanks, John. Thanks for those statistics. The message in the chat kind of echoes some of that too, just from on the ground. Janet Palmtag says that the school food backpack program she's involved with has been growing a great deal since the pandemic, and the food bank distribution lines have also been growing exponentially. And so I think that's another thing, just another piece of evidence that this is a problem that's especially acute this year, but an ongoing problem as well. And that perception versus reality piece, both urban versus rural, and also the perception versus reality about who's on the program, and speaking with folks who administer the program, whether it's out in Scottsbluff or Norfolk or Chadron or wherever, the consistent kind of theme is that there's a disconnect between the way it's thought about and what it actually is, as far as the people on it being working folks, who are in a tough spot for one reason or another, and are not necessarily desiring to be on SNAP, but need it to get by and to get to that next step. And so I don't know if anything in that conversation strikes anything for you, Amanda, that you'd like to add.
No, I mean, like you said, in the rural area, it's happening here too. I mean, during when COVID hit and the kids weren't allowed to be in school anymore, we also had our, school backpack program grow immensely. And it was opened up to the whole community, whether you had kids school age or not. And there was lines up there for kids to get free food. I mean, it was limited to just the children, not the whole family, but I mean, between seeing our food bank and seeing the school that way, I mean, it was evident here, even in a small town, like I said, of 1,200 people.
Do you have any statistics, Amanda, on that you could give us?
I will have to talk to those two entities to get the statistics. I apologize that I don't have those for today.
It's okay.
There's even, like I said, people are very proud here. They don't ask for help until they absolutely need to. You see that trend as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's an ongoing theme too, and that can kind of make it hard to see how this is beneficial and the type of folks it is affecting because of the misperception. The hardworking folks who are using the benefit may not be advertising that fact. I guess another question for you, Amanda, is what is there a certain sort of set of groups or people who are in rural areas that you can say that might be most impacted by some of these effects from the pandemic and by food insecurity?
I would say it probably reached across everyone. I mean, obviously, we're a majority of ranchers and farmers in our rural area of Holt County. O'Neill is our county seat, but the retail businesses, the restaurants, not only having to close their door, but then not knowing if they would have food that they could buy in their local grocery stores as those shelves. So I didn't see their pricing go up a whole lot, but I know unavailability. I mean, there was some weeks where we didn't even have beef that was in our local grocery store. So he had to reach out and he got more pork to come in, the business owner, as well as fish, so that people were still getting some types of protein, that weren't through a food bank, but they were going to their local grocery store to buy. I mean, those were the areas that I would say were hurt the most, not just by those that were on SNAP.
Sure, and I think that's another interesting part of this dynamic to mention as well, which is that there's a whole other sort of issue in rural areas about food access and about smaller towns losing their grocery stores and being in the midst of all that abundance, but still finding it hard to get fresh food or meat, especially earlier this year, like you mentioned. And part of the benefit of SNAP as well is that it pumps that money directly into the local food retailers and food businesses. And so it has a multiplying effect on the local economy when there's more of those food dollars entering right into the local businesses. And if you've got that food retail store on Main Street or in town, it draws traffic and business to the other businesses too. So I don't know, Senator McCollister, is there anything you'd like to add from kind of that economic stimulus perspective or any other thoughts there?
Oh, good point. For every dollar that comes into rural areas and urban areas from the federal government, it rolls through the economy and multiplies up to makes that single dollar up to $1.70. So it's an economic boon for rural areas particularly because they get those debit cards and they'll use those debit cards in local stores to buy food. So it is an economic driver. And we did some analysis. If we can raise the limit up to 185%, 4,000 extra families will get benefits. And the average benefit per family is about $125. So you're looking at $500,000, and that $500,000 ends up being around 900,000. So it does multiply to a great extent. So it is an economic driver, and in addition to helping the retail stores, both urban and rural.
Yeah,
Wow.
grocery store is, one of our top employers in town, not only for a few full-time jobs, but for our teenagers as well. I mean, they employ at least about 15 to 20 kids through our community, and that's huge for how small our town is and teaching them economic as well by having a job. So,
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I think those grocery businesses and keeping them. I don't have it on hand right now, but I know that in some of those smaller towns, in particular, there's a substantial part of monthly revenue that's coming from EBT, and there's which is to say those debit cards with SNAP benefits or other types of food assistance, and so that's an important part of. That's an important part of the revenue for those stores, and they actually kind of depend on that consistent stream in some cases of their revenue as well. So yeah, it's a very important point, and those are some powerful figures about the multiplying role of what this particular bill would do and expanding the amount of that money that's going into local stores. It's we, I think, are kind of coming up to the end of our hour here, and I don't know that we have further questions, but I'd like to give you each an opportunity then to offer any concluding thoughts that you might have. Senator McCollister, you can begin.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to appreciate the call. Thanks, Nathan, and to your group for sponsoring the call. It's great to have folks like John Hanson on the call who can give us statistics that are pretty hard to refute. But the need is there, rural and urban, and given the rural senators in the body, I'm going to need some help with those people. So when the bill does come up, jump into action, and let's get those guys convinced that the bill needs to be passed. So unless somebody's got a specific question, I rest my case.
Thank you very much. Amanda, any concluding thoughts?
I guess if there's anything I can reiterate is to hopefully someday lose that stigmata that they think that this program is only for people that are unwilling to work. I mean, prime example, I wanted to better myself as well as my child and not be dependent on anybody else. And I just wish that there was a lot of those senators that understood that this is for hardworking people as well.
Who's your state senator, Amanda? Is that Tim Gregor?
Yep, Tim Gregor. And so I will definitely reach out to him. I had different conversations with him as I was a journalist because I obviously interviewed him several times as he was campaigning. So he knows who I am. I'll get in touch with him.
Yeah, and he's a good guy.
Yeah, he is. And he owns a grocery store too.
Well, he's perfect then.
Yep.
Good job. And what a success story you are. Way to go.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, yes, I think that's true. We can all agree you've got a really wonderful and inspiring story there, and it points exactly to that reality too. It's not just a claim, but a fact that this misperception is a misperception, and that the program helps people who are working hard and trying to do better and trying to do what's best for their family and all that. And so I want to reiterate that, and also that that this program is, has these economic benefits too, and it's just kind of a win-win, I think, for rural communities, and that's sort of what we discussed here today. So everybody who's on the call, we really suggest that you stay tuned in and subscribe to our lists, and we'll keep you abreast of this bill as it moves forward, and opportunities to be involved and to comment and to pay attention. So again, Amanda, thanks so much for being here. Senator McCollister, thank you as well. We really appreciate your time and your input. And thanks everybody for listening in. With that, yep, absolutely. We'll let you get about your day, and we appreciate you all being here.
All right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.